Hello, this is Hwan Sansanim, and welcome to part 2 of our special two-part series in which we explore the question, do human beings possess extraordinary abilities? In part 1, we learned that there has been a very extensive history of actual scientific research in this area of the exploration of extraordinary abilities, and this field of research is called parapsychology. For example, in 1882, the Society for Psychical Research was founded in London, beginning this tradition of scientific research, and in the 20th century, this type of research has continued. In part 1, we also explored the data regarding the so-called Big Five human psychic abilities, which parapsychological researchers consider to be proven beyond the shadow of a doubt. These 5 abilities are telepathy, precognition, clairvoyance, psychokinesis, and psychic healing. In part 1, we covered the first 3, telepathy, precognition, and clairvoyance. Join us now in part 2 as we consider the data regarding the possible human abilities in psychokinesis and psychic healing. So what is psychokinesis? Psychokinesis in the past also called telekinesis. These days the term psychokinesis seems to be more in favor, and this refers to the ability to influence physical systems without the use of any known sensory channels or physical mechanisms. It's the idea of using the mind to influence matter. And in this regard, I'd like to talk a little bit about one of the most famous exercises of psychokinesis there is in popular culture, namely spoon bending. Now, Jack Hook, an aeronautical engineer in the United States, is a host of what he calls PK parties. PK is the abbreviation for psychokinesis. These are also called spoon bending parties, in which people who are interested in this kind of thing get together with an enormous pile of very heavy spoons, and they attempt to bend those spoons with their minds. And it just so happens that I happen to be carrying a spoon. Now, I don't normally carry spoons around with me, but Jack Hook tells us that the way to bend the spoon with your mind is as follows. You take that spoon, you focus on the part of the spoon that you want to affect, and then you command it to bend, and then you just let your mind go. So why don't we try it? So focus, empty your mind, imoko, and then let's command the spoon to bend. Bend, bend, bend. I can't bend spoons with my mind. And I'll remind you that in part 1, we did say that the effect size of the so-called Big Five psychic abilities tend to be very small. You don't get these dramatic displays of incredible powers that we're used to seeing in popular media. And the kind of experiments that have been done in psychokinesis actually usually involve what's called a random event generator. And one of the most commonly used random event generators is to use a computer that randomly prints out zeros and ones. So at any moment there is a 50% possibility that it will print either a 0 or a 1. And it prints out so many zeros and ones, thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of zeros and ones, so that you get over time almost exactly 50% zeros and 50% ones. It's very, very hard to get more zeros or more ones as the computer prints out more and more of them. And what the research involves is usually to have test subjects try to make the computer print more of one number or another number. And this type of experiment has been performed thousands of times by Professor Robert G. Yan, the founder of PEAR Labs, that's Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Labs at Princeton University, in working with clinical psychologist Brenda Dunn. Using random event generators, they have found over thousands and thousands of trials that ordinary people, they believe, they theorize, possess PK ability. There are many other kinds of random event generators. Some involve rolling hundreds, if not thousands of balls down a chute where they'll fall into one of several tubes. And what the test subjects have to do is try to make the balls mentally fall more often into one or more of those tubes. And again, we do see PK effects. Again, this is not as dramatic as what we might see in the movies or on television, but the parapsychological researchers tell us that the evidence is so compelling that they have to conclude that all human beings possess the ability to mentally affect physical systems. Now, the last of the big 5 psychic abilities is psychic healing. And technically speaking, psychic healing is actually a kind of PK, a kind of psychokinesis. In the case of psychic healing, what psychic healers are doing is they are mentally affecting a living physical system, a living organism with hopefully positive healing influences. Now, there has been a great deal of research and experimentation in the field of psychic healing. And just to name an example, there is a professor of psychology named Gary Schwartz, the director of the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health at the University of Arizona, where they perform research in what he calls integrative body, mind, spirit research. And what he's done is he has attached, in observation studies, he has attached different kinds of sensors to self-proclaimed psychic healers as they perform their healing sessions. And through these sensors, he's discovered that when the psychic healers are actually in the act of healing, their bodies begin to emit highly ordered light waves that are too faint for the human eye to detect. Their bodies also, according to him, generate huge bursts of electrostatic energy. So in one of his experiments, what he did was he arranged for 10 psychic healers to be given, each one of them was given 2 leaves from the same plant. And they were asked to perform their psychic healing on only one of the 2 leaves. What they did was they performed 10-minute healings every 24 hours, 4 times on the leaves. And then the researchers observed both leaves, the one that had been given the healing treatment and the one that had not, for a long period of time. Now, one of the healers dropped out during the middle of the experiment. So there were nine pairs of leaves, and of which 9 leaves had been given the healing treatment. And to their astonishment, what they found was that at day 58, the leaves that had been given the healing treatment were still alive, still completely fresh. Meanwhile, the leaves that had not been given the healing treatment actually withered so completely that they totally disappeared. So the experiment went on far longer than anyone expected. So in part 1, we learned that from the Buddhist perspective, it's completely natural that human beings might display such abilities. They might express themselves in the course of sun meditation practice. There are also other kinds of meditation practices designed specifically to cultivate such latent psychic abilities. But what is the Buddhist stance on the appropriateness of cultivating such abilities? To ask the question in another way, should we try, as Buddhist practitioners, should we try to develop such abilities? Let's listen to Sun Master Songdam now as he explains to us what to do in the course of sun meditation practice if such events or experiences occur, if we begin to display something that's very, very unusual. So once again, please assume proper meditation posture. Tuck in your chin, straighten your spine, relax your shoulders. Tuck the tip of your tongue against the roof of your mouth. Completely relax your body from the top of your head to your feet. Let's engage Dantian breathing. Breathe very deeply. Inhale. Pause. And then exhale. And now let's engage the Hwadu. Imoko. What is this? What is this that directs my body? What is this that thinks my thoughts and feels my emotions? We breathe in, pause, and then on the out-breath in our minds, we ask ourselves, Imoko, and raise the doubt that is the heart of sun meditation practice. And so in sun meditation, let's listen now together to the teachings of Sun Master Songdam.
신수 만경련이 전주 경계를 따라서 마음을 굴러가는 시대가 굴러가는 곳마다 다 눈이 깊숙한 그 바닥 경계에 따라서 집착을 하면 마음도 조용할 수가 없고 편안할 데가 없으나 어떠한 경계를 만나 좋은 경계를 만나거나 내 마음에 안 맞는 경계를 만나거나 일체에서 즉각 생각을 그 경계에 즉해서 본참 화두를 들면 경계마다 그 가장 유수하다고 수요인 득승하면 그 흐름에 따라서 그때마다 성품을 인격하면 우리 너무 다 기도할 것도 없고 근심할 것도 없고 부처님 말씀이 나무 토막을 물에다가 내려놓으면 그 나무가 흐름에 따라서 내려가는데 물에 떠내려간 나무가 중간 언덕에 걸리지 아니하 또 사람이 건져 보이지 않거나 또는 귀신을 가로막는 바가 되지 않고 물이 빙빙 도는 그런 속에 들어가지 않고 또 나무가 바다가 출입하면 썩어버리지 않는다면 내가 보증하노니 이 나무는 결정코 바다에 들어가거나 말 것이다. 이렇게 말씀하셨습니다. 그러면 양쪽 언덕에 걸리지 않는다고 하는 것은 생산이 열반이니 하는 그러한 생각에 집착이 되지 말아야 합니다. 생산은 나쁜 것이고 열반은 좋은 것이다. 대부분 상식적으로 그렇게 생각합니다만 생사다 열반이다 하는 생각은 한편설로서 초신자들에게 어찌든지 생사에 대한 공포심을 가지고 꾸준히 열반의 저덕으로 가야 한다. 발심하도록 하는 무상을 느끼고 발심을 하도록 하기 위한 그러한 단계에서 법문이 될지언정 화두를 이루고 본격적으로 참선하는 마당에는 버려야 할 생사도 없고 취해야 할 열반도 없다. 사람에게 나무토막이 흘러가다가 그 나무토막이 쓸만하다 해가지고 사람의 입을 던져버리면 그 나무는 바다에까지 가지 못하는데 그것은 무엇에다가 비유해서 하신 말씀이냐면 선업에 착한 바가 되지 아니한 것은 이 인간 세상이나 하늘나라에서는 선업을 주장을 하고 좋은 업 쌓는 것을 대단히 좋은 것으로 칭찬을 하고 그러려고 우리가 노력들을 합니다. 물론 악한 업보다는 선업이 좋은 것이고 사람으로서 해야 한다면 선업을 해야겠지만 최상승법에 발심해가지고 화두를 들고 정진하는 마당에는 선업에 집착할 것도 없어. 그러면 악한 짓도 하지 말고 착한 짓도 하지 말고 아무것도 하지 말고 가만히 있으라는 게 아니라 물론 무엇을 했다 하면은 선업을 해야 하는 건데 그 선업에도 집착하는 마음을 갖지 말아라. 좋은 일을 하되 무상으로 해라. 무심으로 해라 이거지. 그 다음에 귀신의 가로막는 바가 되지 않는다는 말은 사견에 빠지는 것이죠. 사견은 귀신. 정진을 하다가 무엇이 뒷전에 무엇을 일을 꿈에 무엇을 어떻게 정진을 하고 일 무엇이 휙지는가 심지가 약하고 그러면은 열심히 정진하다 보면 식이 맑아지면은 와기가 날리는 그 기운에 접해가지고 그래가지고 무엇이 보이기도 하고 무엇이 알아지기도 하고 그게 아주 공부가 잘 된 것처럼 착각을 해가지고 그러는 수가 있는데 그게 다 평소에 무엇이 좀 알아졌으면 무슨 신통력을 얻었으면 그러한 생각을 가지고 있음으로 해서 마귀가 날리는 그런 기운이 자기에게 돋게 되는 것이다. 철저한 정법을 믿는 바른 생각을 가지고 정진을 해야지 잠깐이라도 잘못된 삿된 생각을 가지면 금방 그런 기운이 들어오게 되는 것이다. 그 다음에 물이 빙빙 도는 쏘의 흐름에 나무통안에 들어가면 밤낮 그 자리에서 빙빙 돌기만 하지 흐름 따라서 내려가지 못하는 게 이것은 삼계의 쏘의 몸이에요. 삼계는 6개, 3개, 2개가 삼계인데 정말 최상승법을 믿고 실천하는 사람은 일체처일체시에 집착하는 마음을 안 가져야지. 집착하는 마음을 가지면 삼계 유전할 수밖에는 없는 거예요. 나도 이먹고 악한 것을 많이 하고 명예나 권리나 지위, 부귀 이용하는 만나서 일체처일체시의 흥망성쇠와 생로병사 모든 경계에 거기에 내가 마음을 일으켜서 집착하지 말고 그 자리에서 한파도를 부르고 파도에 대한 의단이 통로토록 잡들이기 때문에 이것이 3개월 후에 머무른 바가 되지 않는 것이다. 그 다음에 나무가 가다가 썩어져 버리면 부서져서 바닥에까지 가지를 못할 것이다. 수행자가 썩어진다고 하는 것은 이승우 멸진정에 집착을 해가지고 거기에 머물렀고 화두에 대한 철저한 의단을 그어가고 의단으로 정리를 해나가지 않으면 아까 양쪽 언덕에 걸려서도 큰 물이 물줄기가 흘러내려오면 다시 또 떠내려갈 수도 있고 사람이 건졌다가도 다시 집어넣으면 또 흘러내려갈 수가 있고 귀신이 맞거나 소에 들어갔다가도 어떻게 하다 보면 다시 또 흘러내려갈 수도 있지만 그 자체가 썩어버리면 그건 천하는 일이 있어도 그건 바다에 도달할 수가 없어. 지혜롭게 정리를 잘 하시기를 부탁드립니다.
In his Dharma speech, Sun Master Songdam tells us that the mind is like a spinning wheel, continually creating different mind states. And he warns us against becoming attached to or pursuing any of those mind states. And such mind states might include the emergence of so-called psychic abilities or other kinds of truly unusual visionary experiences. In another of his Dharma speeches, Sun Master Songdam tells the story of a hermit. Now, this hermit went up into the mountains, and in his hermitage, he began to practice meditation very, very intensely. He stopped talking. He regulated his sleep very, very strictly, sleeping only a little bit every night. He regulated his food and water intake very, very strictly, choosing to consume only certain kinds of the most pure food and the most pure water. And he regulated his breathing and his motions to enter into extremely profound states of peace and clarity. And he meditated like this with great diligence and perseverance for a long time. And as time progressed, he began to experience states of bliss and vision and perception that he had never known before. His mind became so clear, his body so light, that he was able to see events in the future, events in locations far from where he was. He felt that he had transcended the limits of space and time, that he had developed a universal vision. Over time, he believed that he had become enlightened. And in believing that he had become enlightened, he decided to come out of his hermitage and come down from the mountain and see what he could do to help his fellow human beings. And so when he came down from the mountain and he met people for the first time, they were astonished to see his radiance, his luminosity, his transcendent peace, and they flocked to him. And he felt great pity for them and great compassion for them, and so he began to help them as much as he could. He gave them advice about their health and who to marry, what would happen in the future, what was going on with their loved ones. And he very openly displayed these psychic abilities, what we now call psychic abilities, in his mind to help other people. And so a kind of religion formed around him, a religious sect formed around him. And he developed many, many followers, and he became very, very famous and very, very respected. And the years passed, and he found that in being so busy meeting people and helping them, that he could no longer regulate his sleep as strictly as he used to. He became lax in his regulation of his food and water intake. He began to eat things that he had not eaten before. He didn't regulate his breathing as much as he used to. And as time passed and as his celebrity grew, and as his influence grew, and as more and more people flocked to him to adore him and to follow him and to lean on him and depend on him to live their own lives, he began to feel that in his enlightenment, he had transcended all ordinary conventional notions of decency and indecency, good and evil, and so forth. He had become enlightened to a truth that was beyond human definition. And so his behavior became more outrageous. And he began to engage in activities and relationships that he had prevented himself from doing, that he had abstained from before. And as time passed, as the years and decades passed, to his great distress, he found that his mind had become clouded and he was beginning to lose his abilities. He could not see as clearly as he did before. But even so, the followers kept coming to him for advice and for help. And he was too ashamed, too embarrassed to admit that he had lost his abilities, that he had basically come back to the way he was before he had gone into the mountain. And so he began to just give predictions and remedies and advice without the use of such abilities. And over time, his followers began to realize that he was wrong. He was oftentimes wrong. And as the years passed, his followers began to leave him, and he fell into great despair and humiliation. And at the same time, the religious sect that had formed around him was also overwhelmed by scandal and the loss of faith. So in this story, Sun Master Songdam suggests to us and conveys to us that the deliberate cultivation and exercise of psychic abilities could actually be harmful to us. And he tells us over and over again in his Dharma speeches that even if such events or abilities should display themselves, we should not pay attention to them, we should never become attached to them, and we should engage our sun meditation practices as if for the first time. So why is there this strong warning against the development and use of such psychic abilities? And I think that the implication is this. The Sun Buddhist tradition, I think, is telling us that as intriguing as such psychic abilities might be to people, normal people like us, nonetheless there is a strong possibility that they might bring out the worst in us. Why would that happen? Well, we have to ask ourselves, what is the true basis for our curiosity about these psychic abilities? Why are we interested in developing them? Why did the student who came up to me recently ask me if there is really such a thing as the X-Men? And I think that if we're very, very honest with ourselves, we would have to admit that the real reason why we would be interested in the development of psychic abilities is because we want an advantage. What kind of advantage? We want an advantage in our ability to fulfill our desires. What kind of desires are those? Well, first of all, I think there is the desire to be able to protect ourselves from the threat of others. We want an advantage in the ability to protect ourselves from harm. And it's easy to think that if we could tell the future, if we could read people's minds, if we could know what's going on in a different location, if we could heal ourselves, if we could affect matter with our minds, that we would have such an advantage. The second kind of desire that we want to fulfill, that we want an advantage in fulfilling, is the desire to have people do what we want them to do. And we do want so many things from other people. We want to be loved, we want to be liked, we want to be respected, we want to be admired, we want people to be attracted to us. Sometimes we even want people to fear us, sometimes we even want people to envy us. And through this influence on other people, we also have desires to accumulate wealth and fame. There are so many desires that we want to fulfill, and so it's natural to also desire an advantage when trying to fulfill them. Now, what all of these desires have in common is this. All of them feed the ego. And when we feed our egos indiscriminately like that, almost anyone starts to become more self-centered, more self-absorbed, more selfish, ultimately more vain, more inconsiderate about the needs and feelings of others. And if this goes on for too long, then we might begin to feel that we're special, that we're better than others, that we're the most important person. And when we begin to feel like we're the most special, most important person, we begin to feel like we are the center of the world. And at that point, it becomes obvious that we are becoming narcissistic and delusional. And when we become delusional, that's really just a fancy way of saying we're starting to get a little bit crazy and pathetic. And when we get crazy and pathetic, we begin to do things to harm ourselves and others. And this, I believe, is the basis for the reason why Sun Master Songdam so strongly warns against attachment to any kind of unusual abilities. Instead of the development of such psychic abilities, so-called psychic abilities, instead, he counsels us to stay focused on our sun meditation practice no matter what. Always stay focused wherever we are, in whatever environment that we find ourselves, on our hwadu, imoko. So let's once more assume sun meditation posture, resume our Dantian breathing, and now let's listen to Sun Master Songdam as he explains to us, as no one else can, the true path to enlightenment.
만 가지 의심을 다 이 한 의단 속으로 몰아붙여야 합니다. 우리는 공부를 해나가는데 가정생활이나 사회생활을 하거나 무엇을 눈으로 보고 뭘 들으면 아지 못하는 것을 많이 만나게 됩니다. 불교의 경리는 내 있는 경구가 되었건 무엇이든지 아지 못한 것을 만나면 그것을 사량 분별로 따져서 앉아보지 말고 무슨 의심이 되었건 즉각 자기 본창하도록 그 의심을 돌려야 한다. 세속적이거나 불교의 어떤 것에 대해서 그 의심을 난 것을 따져서 알아봤자 깨달으려면 아무 소용이 없고 어떠한 의심이 되었건 그 의심을 돌이켜서 화두의 의심으로 돌이켜야 한다고. 그렇게 해가지고 의심해 오고 의심해가 행주 좌와 우묵동진 간에 자기의 본창 화두를 이렇게 의심을 하는 위해서 스스로 그 의단을 관조해라고. 눈에 띈 대로 거기에 의심을 이걸 닥치는 대로 뭐를 알려고 그러고 따지려고 그러고 언제 의답이 통로하게 되거냐. 다시 있으면 있어도 이고 밥이 잘못되어도 이고 반찬이 짜도 이고 친구하도 이고 철밥 봐도 이고 팥죽을 봐도 이고 이체처리 절시 화장실에 가도 이고 차를 타도 이고 저런 의심이 동무호도 작두를 해나가면 나중에는 챙기지 않아도 똑같이 챙기지 않고 있게 될 때가 오래야만 나는 것이다. 수신나용 타공 모름지기 용을 때려잡고 동을 때려잡을 만한 그런 장부의 기상을 가져야 한다. 나는 학원이니까, 나는 여자니까, 나는 늙었으니까, 나는 무식하니까 그런 생각을 갖지 말고 빈부귀천, 남녀노소, 무무식을 막론하고 일체 동생이 다 시용일선이 다 불선이 부처님과 똑같은 성불할 수 있는 자격을 갖춰져 있는 그런 존재다. 그러니 어찌 스스로 자포자기를 할 수가 있느냐. 장부의 기상을 가지고 소리를 펴고 눈을 평상으로 뜨고서 숨을 깊게 마셨다 내쉬면서 거기에 무슨 남녀 요소가 있으면 거기에 무슨 빈부귀천이 있으면 그게 무슨 어리석고 영리한 것이 그게 있을 거냐. 그래야 그렇게 해서 성적적으로 작두를 해 나가면 자연히 무당이 동무고 순일무기 앞에서 타성일편이 될 때가 오야만 말 것이다. 그때는 한기 몰아쳐서 설성과는 그렇게 배워야만 말다.
So in his Dharma speech, Sun Master Songdam tells us to engage the Hwadu Imoko in all places and at all times. To put it in his words, when we're riding on the subway, when we're eating our meals, even when we go to the bathroom, and so forth. And as we do this, what we find is that focusing on the Imoko Hwadu acts as a powerful self-regulatory device for dealing with our everyday difficulties and our negative emotions and thoughts. But that's not the true purpose of sun meditation. Enlightenment is the true purpose. And so we continue with this constant returning back to our original Hwadu, as he puts it, coming back to Imoko over and over as much as we possibly can in every moment of the day. And when we do this, according to him, what we find is that this sensation of doubt begins to grow within our body and mind. What is called within the Sun Buddhist tradition, the mass of doubt manifesting alone. The achievement of one piece in a blow. And what this refers to is the feeling that the doubt begins to permeate our consciousness, so that over time we no longer have to keep asking ourselves imoko over and over again. And when we do this, no matter what we look at, no matter what we experience in our senses, all we're really feeling is the doubt of imoko. And when we continue with this, we can even experience the doubt in our sleep, even in our dreams. And according to Sun Master Songdam, when we get to this point where the doubt is manifesting on its own, then in a very short time, our minds awaken in the experience known as enlightenment. According to the Sun Buddhist tradition, psychic ability has no true value and actually represents a danger to us. The Sun meditative path to enlightenment is the true path of human empowerment. The Sun Buddhist tradition tells us that our ability as human beings to awaken, to become enlightened to our own true nature is in fact our greatest ability. And this enlightened ability to lead and guide other people to enlightenment is in fact our true mission in life and our true role in the universe. It is the greatest possible contribution that we can make. When we look at all of this, this ability to awaken and then guide other people to enlightenment is our true human superpower, and every single one of us possesses it. And if we want to awaken this power, all we need to do is, as Sun Master Songdam tells us, practice imoko in every moment of every day. Take this path to our own enlightenment. This brings us to the conclusion of part 2 of our special 2-part series that deals with the question, do human beings really possess extraordinary abilities? I hope you enjoyed this journey. I certainly have. And as we come to the conclusion of this episode, let me thank once again all of the viewers who have watched today's program. And now I will conclude with the traditional Buddhist greeting. May we all attain enlightenment. Now once again, assuming proper sun meditation posture, we will enter into our closing meditation.